Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. It is a pleasure to be back here again in Texas. I'm having a great time down here. Your pastor is treating me like a king. This is so much fun. And you're blessed to have a pastor like that. And you really are, because he wants to equip you for what's happening. And I'm Brian Lauer. I'm from Minnesota, and I've got a YouTube channel called Solidify Your Faith. And you'll notice there I've got a playlist specifically for the hydroplate. You know, I think this is the battering ram that we could use to destroy the Big Bang. The Big Bang is falling apart. It's not making accurate predictions. They're always shocked. And if you, oh, and by the way, if you can't hear, just put your thumb up if you can't hear me in the back. We're good? Okay, good. All right. And then we've also got a podcast. I was on Kent Hovind's podcast twice this summer. And I interviewed Carl Baugh last year. He's a guy who saw dinosaur footprints with human footprints over by Glen Rose. And then I also interviewed Dr. Phil Stringer. And those are the two people. If I could interview anybody in the world, it'd be those two. And you'll learn why about Phil on Sunday morning in Sunday school. And so I'm excited about that. But this is, again, my favorite talk. This is my favorite talk. The hydroplate, I had this poster hanging up at St. Cloud State. And it got stolen twice, but it answers a lot of questions. And again, the Big Bang is falling apart. Here's some headlines. Webb spots super old massive galaxies that shouldn't exist. And it's bananas is what they say. And there's on Real Science Radio, they have a list of shocked evolutionists, and they're headbanging, and they're always surprised. These galaxies should not have time to form. And yet, James Webb Telescope spots something in space that shouldn't exist. They discovered an interesting dwarf galaxy that truly shouldn't be possible, yet somehow it does. It shouldn't exist, but it does. There's a crisis in their theory, according to Scientific America. It leads to a new understanding of the universe. There's something seriously wrong, according to Live Science. And then this one, scientists say dark matter is impossible. And they need dark matter to keep that Big Bang together. And then the standard model of cosmology is flawed, and we need a new one. So it's not working, according to the Jerusalem Post. So the Big Bangers, based on their blind chance perspective that we talked about last night, is not working. They have egg on the face. And so this is going to be dogs that are trying to get to the food. There's the Big Bangers going up there. They think they got it all figured out. They're making predictions, and they're wrong. And they're wrong again. And they're wrong again. This guy says, no, you guys are wrong. That's Walt Brown right there. He's like, you guys got it wrong. I think we got the hydroplate theory here. I think we got this here. And there's some creationists. They go, hey, Walt, you got it figured out. Yeah, that's me. You know, there's people that use the hydroplate that can make accurate predictions, but the Big Bangers, they get a lot of money. You get a lot of funding for that bad prediction. And so, there's a lot of money that NASA is wasting, and they're trying to figure it out, and there's more money down the drain, and they just can't figure it out. Then you get these theistic evolutionists that they try to get there, and they just can't make it. But Walt's got it all figured out, and but these people, they still keep trying. And so, so Walt's got the answer. There's a theistic evolutionist trying to go halfway in the Bible, halfway in science. It's not a good position to be. It's like pick the Bible or, pick the Big Bang or pick the Bible. And he's in a bad spot. Yeah, just pick the Bible. The Bible is right. Think you can make it across? It's going to be tough. Going to be tough. Hang in there, buddy. Hang in there. Oh, I can't do it. All right. Okay, so you got the Big Bangers, they can't make it, but they get all the funding, but Walt's right. And the hydroplate is being shunned not only by evolutionists, but by creationists. They rejected the hydroplate papers a couple of years ago, I believe. And so we had our very own hydroplate conference last year, and I was promoting it at St. Cloud State. That's the poster that was stolen twice. They know who did it, but they won't make them pay. But we just keep plugging along. And those are the talks. You can see the talks on YouTube and on Rumble. And we had 3 PhDs. One of them was from the U.S. Air Force Academy. I emceed the thing. It was so much fun. I was like a kid in a candy store. So you can check all that out. And Pete Morey flew me down here in June to give the talk. Those words on the left there, those are screenshots from scientific journals. Researchers want to know why. Unexpected, fossil oddity, long-standing puzzle. I totally didn't believe it. It shouldn't exist. Scientists puzzle, double-ended mystery, surprising features. They're always wrong. They're always hitting their face on the table. They just can't get there. You know, unanswered questions, world of surprises, and it just goes on and on. But the hydroplate has the answers. And let's take a look at some of those screenshots. This is from Science Daily. Earth's crust missing in the mid-Atlantic. It exposed the seafloor. Well, why is it missing? Tonight you'll know. Was the crust never there? Was it once there but then torn away? If so, how and why? Well, we got the answer. And then this is Nature says, unlocking the mysteries of the ice ages. It says, perhaps the longest standing puzzle in Earth science is what caused the northern hemisphere ice sheets to come and go. That's right, what caused them? And once it started, why did it stop? We got the answer. And then fossil oddity, giant redwoods near the North Pole. How can they grow up there when it's dark 4 months of the year? And then it tests out that these fossils are chemically preserved at levels you usually would expect to see in something that's only 1,000 years. Okay, not millions of years. And then one of the 11th greatest unanswered questions in physics is, how were the heavy elements formed from iron to uranium? They have a hard time with that. This is from Science. They say, we are all made of star stuff. The Big Bang created hydrogen, helium, and a little bit of lithium and other light atoms, but everything else, the carbon, oxygen, and almost 100 other elements that make up animals, plants, and Earth itself, was made by stars. The problem is that physicists aren't quite sure how stars did it. So they don't know. And when they say stuff like that, again, just say prove it. I want to see it this time. The moon is rusting. Did you know that? And researchers want to know why. You know, that's got, while our moon is airless, it has hematite, a form of rust that normally requires oxygen and water. It has scientists puzzled. Why is that happening? Very puzzling. The moon is a terrible environment for the hematite to form in, and I totally didn't believe it. It shouldn't exist based on the conditions present on the moon. That's right, it shouldn't exist, but it does, and we'll explain why. And then the comet close-up reveals a world of surprises, according to science. I find it hard to believe at the present time that comet 67P was originally homogeneous. Comet-forming regions of the early solar system were more turbulent and chemically diverse than theorists have thought, so theorists were wrong again. Okay, and this is wire-rounded boulders on comet 67P. That's one of the most surprising features. You got rounded boulders up there. You know, in space, if things slam together, they're going to have jagged edges. These are rounded. And we'll explain why. And how do you get these peanut-shaped asteroids? It's a major mystery, according to Aviation Week in Space Technology, how two objects each the size of skyscrapers could collide without blowing each other to smithereens. This is especially puzzling in a region of the solar system where gravitational forces would normally involve collision speeds of 4,500 miles an hour. So that's a problem, a big problem. And a distant asteroid revealed a complex mini-geological world which shouldn't be there. How did a peanut-shaped asteroid get a moon? Both of those things are impossible, or they used to say it was impossible. It's a mystery. You know, how do asteroids get a moon? And listen to Kevin Lee. He'll explain this.
There's a strange moon of the asteroid Dinkinish. When the Lucy probe was here looking at Dinkinish, it saw this. Oh, another asteroid with a moon. And then it went a little bit further and took another angle at it. And it said, oh, it's an asteroid with a moon that is made up of two components that are contact binaries of the same size. Absolutely impossible, except for the hydroplate theory. Principal investigator for Lucy said in a statement, I would have never expected a system that looks like this. In particular, I don't understand why the two components of the satellite have similar sizes. This is going to be fun for the scientific community to figure out. No, it's not going to be fun. They're never going to figure it out unless they embrace the hydroplate theory premise of how they were sent up into space. Contact binary systems seem to be fairly common. Now there's, oh yeah, this is common to find contact binaries, which was impossible to them a few years ago until they keep finding them everywhere. But scientists hadn't seen one orbiting an asteroid prior to Dinkinish, and we never suspected anything so bizarre. Details of how this unusual moon formed remain mysterious, and it will remain mysterious until people embrace Dr. Brown's hydroplate theory. They'll never figure it out. Scientists were shocked in 1993 when for the first time they saw a moon orbiting an asteroid. called dactyl. They said it was impossible, and then they saw it. Galileo scientists correctly stated that it is virtually impossible, that the moon is a captured object, something created completely separately from light. It is impossible to catch a moon in the vacuum of space. Now, decades later, scientists have found that 17%, more than 245 asteroids have orbiting moons. And now a moon with the moon can only be explained by the hydroplate theory.
That's right. Yeah, so their theory doesn't work. And you can see more of these clips on our YouTube channel, Twin Cities Creation Science Association. You can see more of those clips, short ones like that, or the whole talk. And yeah, they can't explain it. According to their blind chance perspective, it can't happen. Because for things that coming together in space, they're either going to slam together or going to slingshot around each other. It's like he said, it's impossible to catch a moon. And yet they're finding 17% of the asteroids have them. So how did that happen? And he said the hydroplate will answer it, and it will. And then you got this. What's up with Naiku? An object, weird orbit puzzles scientists. That's something way past Neptune. It's a trans-Neptune object. Beyond Neptune, a chunk of ice is orbiting the sun in the wrong direction. Problem. Houston, we have a problem with this theory again. According to NASA, Mount Everest, the presence of limestone ocean marine fossils at the top of the mountains is one of the key pieces of evidence that's cited that advance the idea of plate tectonics. And plate tectonics is wrong. Okay, and we just had a roundtable discussion in September at the Greater Houston Creation Association, and we'll try and get a roundtable discussion open in Minnesota, zoom it up there. But then the question is, what caused the mountain to rise? What's the mechanism? What's the force? What's the energy? And how did that marine fossils get all the way up there? And then the plateau is a major mystery too. What mechanism would cause a large volume of low-standing continents to rise rapidly a mile in the air? And down at the bottom, we then have a double-ended mystery, for the Colorado Plateau seems to have grown downward at the same time it emerged parts road upward. So that's a problem. And then how did the Mariana Trench form almost 7 miles below sea level? And it's in the Pacific, along with almost all the other trenches. How did they form, and why are they just in the Pacific? And why is it so much different, and why does it have 40,000 volcanoes? The Pacific's way different than the Atlantic. And how did this mid-oceanic ridge form? That's a mountain range at the bottom of the oceans that goes around the Earth like a seam on the baseball, and is 46,000 miles long. And it's been formed by stretching it in 2 directions. See those straight lines? That's when it's getting stretched and it cracks and it makes a straight line. So you got some going east and west, some going north and south. How do you form a mountain stretching it? Yeah, that's a tough one. And then why are the mountain ranges parallel to the mid-Atlantic ridge? And then what caused the inland seas to form, like the Gulf of Mexico and the Mediterranean, the Black and the Caspian? And in the Gulf of Mexico, there's a single salt layer called the mother salt layer. It's at least 20,000 feet below sea level, 100,000 square miles in area, and 1,000 feet thick. Many tall salt domes rise several miles above the mother salt layer. Some salt domes are taller than Mount Everest. And sediments almost 30,000 feet thick were then deposited on top of the 1,000-foot thick mother salt layer. How in the world does that happen? How do you get salt buried in sediment? Well, I think a whole lot of sediment came off the Mississippi after the flood and buried the salt that was at the bottom of the chamber, and we'll get to that later. And wet salt can float up through dense, freshly deposited sediment. Can't take millions of years. It's got to be freshly deposited. And then this 90 East Ridge, how'd that form? It's 3,100 miles long, and it points directly at the Himalayas. And a lot of questions. Where did the sediment come that averages a mile deep on the continents? And if you have sediment that doesn't have carbon in it, like limestone, it's 65 parts granite, 35 parts basalt. Why is it that ratio? Then what caused it to stick together? You can have a whole bunch of sand on the driveway, but it's not going to turn into cement. Like, we got a lot of sand dunes. They're not turning into sandstone. They just get blown around. They have to have a cementing agent like calcium carbonate or quartz to stick it together. But then how do you mix it all up? And then how come you got layers of sediment? Anybody ever been to the Grand Canyon? Anybody? Those layers just don't end there. They go everywhere on our continent. How do you get continent-wide layers of sediment? Can't happen with a local flood. And Tim Clary from ICR, he's done a lot of research, and he says, hey guys, those are worldwide layers. And Answers in Genesis says that this is evidence the same chalk beds that can be traced across France, the Netherlands, Germany, Poland, southern Scandinavia, and other parts of Europe to Turkey, then to Israel and to Egypt, and as far as Kazakhstan. Remarkably, the same chalk beds with the same fossils and the same distinctive strata layers above and below them are also found from Nebraska to Texas and from Alabama and Arkansas to Colorado and in parts of Australia. What's going to lay down all that stuff worldwide? I would say a worldwide flood. It's screaming strongly worldwide flood. And in Grand Canyon, how do you get those slanted layers underneath flat layers? How does that happen? And why did that Colorado River flow through the plateau instead of around it? The sides are a lot lower, not thousands of feet lower than the middle, and yet the river flows right through it. And then where did all the limestone come from? Because when limestone forms, it releases some carbon dioxide. And there's 60,000 times more limestone on the surface than in the atmosphere. How does that happen? And then this rock at Isis Temple, it's 5 to 10 tons. How did that get lifted up into that sediment? It got formed on the lower layer, and then it got lifted up into sediment. That's going to be tough for millions of years. Just levitate there until it gets underneath. And what force crushes granite? This is the Black Canyon of the Gunnison River, and it looks like a marble cake. Remember, those aren't tension cracks. Tension cracks are straight. This is marble. That got compressed. What can compress granite 50 miles long like that? There's something that had a lot of force at one time, and it's the same thing that you find at the bottom of that Grand Canyon, the Vishnu schist. Then how do mesas, buttes, and spires form? How about petrified trees? How does that form? And how do you get canyons under the ocean? These are submarine canyons. Most of the major rivers have a canyon that's underneath the ocean, and you can't cut it today. You know, some of them are longer than Grand Canyon and deeper. How does a canyon form under 2 kilometers of ice in Greenland? And how about the lakes in Antarctica? You got liquid lakes under 2 miles of ice. And that's a tough one because you got the average summer temp down there is below freezing. How's that going to work? And then the South Pole is mostly covered by ice, but fossils show that crocodiles, dinosaurs, and palm trees once lived on that land. And this is from a government school textbook. So there's palm trees in Antarctica. Well, how is that going to work if it's dark 4 months of the year? And then on the other side of the Earth, you got badgers, snakes, and shrews living in permafrost north of the Arctic Circle. Or they found fossils there. They can't live there now. How did they get there? And then the redwood trees we talked about, and mammoths, frozen mammoths by the lots of them up there. And there's one of them that was frozen standing up. How do you get a mammoth freezing standing up? That's a real tough one. Any deer hunters here? Anybody? Yeah. Do those deer stand up after you shoot them? No. Things tip over when they're dead. Okay, and then mammoths, they're not Arctic animals. They eat too much, they drink too much. There's no way they're going to live in the Arctic. It's not wool, it's hair. And they don't have erector muscles, they don't have oils to make it nice and watertight. Do you guys get cold down here? Does your nose ever get cold in Texas? Just think if it was 6 feet long. Oh, my wife, yeah, she's trying to get, it's 60-some. It got down to 30-some in Minnesota last night, so the high of 60. So she's trying to keep it warm, and I'm trying to keep it cold down here. But yeah, we're winning. And then how did it get so cold so fast in late summer? Because they had identifiable food in that mammoth stomach from late summer. And then why didn't it thaw out? If it's a temperate animal that froze, why didn't it thaw out? Okay, and why were no glaciers in parts of Alaska? You look in the upper left up there, that yellow part is the land bridge between Alaska and Russia. I always thought it was the Aleutian Islands, nice and narrow. It's really wide. And then the brown part up there, that's parts of Siberia and Alaska that didn't have a glacier in the Ice Age. It's got permafrost today, but it didn't have a glacier in the Ice Age. How does that happen? And the same thing over in Siberia. And then why do comets have stuff from Earth? You got water, salt, silicates, limestone, clay, cubonite, olivine. And some of that stuff can only be made in really hot water. And how did Kevin Lee accurately predict what NASA would find in the comets and asteroids? Now, Kevin Lee, he's the big hitter in this thing because he's made accurate predictions. He stood face-to-face with NASA scientists and told them, he predicted accurately what they'd find. And this is what he says about it.
Because I had become a student of the hydroplate theory, I felt fully confident to communicate with Dr. Brownlee and to predict that what he would find was not what he was anticipating. I'm quoting now from his article, A Mission with Many Scientific Surprises. One of the most unexpected was the 2009 discovery of the amino acid glycine. Now, glycine is it's an amino acid used by all life. How could the amino acids have been formed in the vacuum and near absolute zero temperature of space? He was shocked by this discovery. The finding that inner solar system materials formed at very high temperature were transported all the way to the edge of the solar system to the region where Pluto is one of the major scientific findings of stardust. But Dr. Brownlee can't explain how, but the hydroplate theory can say.
Yeah, the hydroplate can. Yeah, he's been making incredibly accurate predictions based on this model. And one of the things they found in the comet was cubonite that forms only under the presence of scalding hot water. Where do you get scalding hot water in the solar system? You know, and liquid water cannot reach those extremely hot temperatures in comet's low pressure environment. How does that happen? And then they found sea plankton found on the outer surface of the International Space Station. They're baffled. How do you get plankton up into outer space? And then these are chondrules. It's like these meteors that have melted spots in them. Chondrules, how these chondrules melted, however, is not understood. It's formed at really high temperatures. Then high energy events such as high velocity collisions, make a note of that, high velocity collisions, and splashed about as droplets that quickly cooled. So a high velocity collision and quickly cooled and crystallized. What's going to do that in outer space? And then Pluto's predictions, they predicted it to be old and beat up, and it's actually young and shiny. And why does it look young? And then why is the far side of the moon so much different than the near side? You see, the near side has all that dark stuff, that's lava flows, and on the far side, they don't have hardly any of that. It's the near side that got pounded with these high density things on the near side, but not the far side. And that's counterintuitive because the Earth protects the near side. If it's coming in from the left, it's going to hit the Earth, not the moon. And if you throw in the Earth's gravity, if it's coming in from the top and the bottom, it's going to be real hard to get a direct hit on the moon on the near side. And yet that's what we see. And then why was the Earth's oldest rock found on the moon? That's a tough one, and it says, according to NASA, the rock crystallized about 20 kilometers beneath the Earth's surface, about 12 miles down there. How does that happen and get down there up onto the moon? And then why do nearly all the short period comets go in the same direction as the Earth? If they come from the Oort cloud, which is what the blind chancers say, they should be 50-50 mixed, but it's not. They're almost all going the same direction as the Earth. So we had a lot of screenshots of secular journals where they're puzzled, and we can answer all this with Walt Brown's hydroplate theory. Yeah, Walt Brown, he was an Army Ranger. He went to West Point. He was a paratrooper and got his PhD from MIT in mechanical engineering. So he's sharp. He ran the Benet military lab where he had dozens of PhDs working for him and 100 scientists, and he's really sharp. And he came up with this theory, and he was going through South Dakota, and he heard on the radio that somebody claimed to have found Noah's Ark on a mountain. And he thought, what a crackpot, you know, because he's a blind chancer. He's an evolutionist. But in South Dakota, there's not much to do. Anybody been there? Count the wall drug signs, that's about it. And so I think just to keep his mind occupied, he thought, just humored him. It's like, well, if they found an ark on a mountain, that means the whole world was covered with water. And if the whole world was covered with water, that means there'd be a whole bunch of plants and animals that got buried in mud. And they would have turned into fossils. And he said, well, wait a minute. If fossils are evidence for a flood, where's the evidence for evolution? And he started asking all his colleagues, really smart PhD colleagues, well, what evidence is there for evolution? And after 2 years, he didn't find any. So he became a creationist, and he put together this model, and it's got biblical assumptions on it. And I gave that book to a professor a few years ago. She had it for she had it for about 6 months, and we got together and talked about it. And she said the science works if the assumption is true. She just didn't believe the assumption. And then I gave it to another professor this fall, because they don't have a theory for Grand Canyon that works. And I showed it to her, and I showed her the chapter, and in 2 days she emailed me back, and she says, well, Walt's not a geologist. We don't have to meet again. And so I picked up the book, and it's like, well, Darwin wasn't a biologist, you know. She said, Walt's not a geologist. And so sometimes it's the outsiders that make the discovery. So she won't even look at it. Well, maybe she did, but she didn't, anyhow. So what is the major assumption? The one assumption, and it's a biblical assumption, the assumption is that half of the ocean was inside the earth at one time. You know, there's verses in there that says there's water, and we'll get to that at the end. So the hydroplate theory, just think of the earth as a big apple. The skin is 60 miles thick, made of granite. Then there's a layer of water about a mile thick, and then underneath that is basalt. And the granite and the basalt are touching each other at certain places, making pillars. Okay, that's the one assumption. And if that's the assumption, she says everything after what I'm saying is valid. Okay, so now what happens now? You throw the science in there. You know, because a theory typically looks at what we have and try and figure out how it got there. They look at the effect and which is known, and try and figure out the cause, which is unknown. This is different. He says the assumption, the cause, he's just putting that one assumption there, and then lets the laws of physics go at it, and then it gives us our effects, which are perfect. And so how do you let the laws of physics go at it? You throw in the moon. Because the moon's going to tug on the earth like it tugs on the tides, so it's going to tug on the crust. And back then, the crust wasn't broken into plates like it is today. So it's going to stretch and compress, stretch and compress, stretch and compress twice a day, and it's going to generate heat. Like if I had a wire up here and bend it back and forth, it's going to get hot. Heat goes into the water gets hotter and hotter and hotter. It wants to boil, but it can't. There's no room to expand. And there's something called supercritical water that they've known about for about 100 years. And when water's at 705 degrees and 3,200 psi, it becomes supercritical. And it's not really water and it's not really steam, but whatever it is, it dissolves things like crazy. So it's starting to dissolve the crust above and the basalt below, and it's starting to mix together these elements like limestone and chalk and quartz. Now the limestone is forming and releasing carbon dioxide, but it just gets recycled. It's not getting into our atmosphere. So and then you got and quartz and that silicon stuff, that can be a cementing agent. And so it's going to keep on building up there, and at a certain temp it comes out of the solution. So you're going to get a big layer of those salts and minerals at the bottom of that subterranean chamber. But eventually that crust gets weaker and weaker, hotter and hotter, more and more pressure. He says that there's about 370,000 psi. And finally the crust cracked. And once it cracked, it just erupted out of there. These are the fountains of the great deep broken up that the Bible talks about in Genesis 7:11. And then that crack went in two directions all the way around the globe and came back. And then this is how it can rain for 40 days and 40 nights. See, our atmosphere today, it can't rain for 40 days and 40 nights, but this will explain it. It's a big fountain, the water's going up, coming down, and people will say, well, if that happened, wouldn't it leave a mark? It's like, yeah, it did. It's called the Mid-Oceanic Ridge. The Mid-Oceanic Ridge, he thinks that, see where it makes a T in that black circle on the right? He thinks that's where it ended, the crack ended, because it came together on itself. So you run the movie backwards, and he thinks it started up by Alaska. And then it just went around at 3 miles a second, and it went together in 2 or 3 hours, and boom, and all the water's erupting out of there. And so now you got this sediment crushing, falling into this hypersonic flow of water. That's where we get our sedimentary rock. That's where all the sediment comes from. And it's 65 parts granite because it's eroding the bottom of the granite and the side of the granite. And then it's only 35% basalt because it's just eroding one side of it. And so then it keeps falling in there, it covers our continents. That's where the layers of sediment come from. And they can get sorted by liquefaction. We don't have time for that tonight. But you got two cliffs now that are 60 miles high, getting wider and wider and wider and wider. Pretty soon there's nothing pushing down on the mantle, and the mantle bulges. Okay, now the continents start to slide. It's like a train. If you pick up a track, it's going to start rolling. Well, that's the continents, and they're on supercritical water, which is like 39 times more viscosity than the normal water, so they start sliding. And again, as that slides, there's less pressure, so then the mid-oceanic ridge bulges even higher, and the continents keep sliding, and you got North America and South America sliding to the west, and Europe and Asia sliding to the east, and they keep going until they meet resistance, and then they buckle up. And that's why the mountain ranges are pretty parallel to the mid-Atlantic ridge. So he doesn't think that mid-Atlantic ridge was there. He thinks that it all got eroded away. And then notice how the Rockies are twice as wide as the Andes. And I think it's because North America slid over the mid-oceanic ridge. And as it went over, it caused a whole bunch of pressure, a whole bunch of heat, a whole bunch of magma being formed. And that's how we get the coal and oil and marble and diamonds, all that pressure and heat. And all that stuff has carbon-14 in it. Can't be millions of years old if you got carbon-14. And this is a picture from British Columbia where the mountains are folded. You know, you can't fold rock. It's going to break. But if they got pushed together and there was just sediment that was wet, and then it drained and then it turned into rock, that would work. And if you want to do an experiment at home, just take your best piece of china and bend it and see how that turns out for you. And that's how you get the crushed rock in the Gunnison Canyon, that granite. And for scale there, those trees on top are 15 feet tall. So that's a lot of force that needed to crush that granite, but that's the continent going one way and then hitting something, and it just kept on going, and then it compressed it, just like under the Grand Canyon. That's what happened. And in the Grand Canyon, as it crushed, it buckled up, so all the sediment that was sliding on top of it keeps sliding, and it shears off. So now you got the slanted ones under the flat ones. And then you get the slanted ones under the flat. And then this quartzite, I think it's made of sandstone, under pressure, that piece breaks off there and gets lifted up, and then it gets, and that's where it lands. That's where it is, in Isis Temple. And those are Walt Brown's grandsons there. I called somebody about it, Nate Lopez, and he gives canyon ministry guides. If anybody's going out there, they give a creation perspective of the canyon. From the river or from above, they do them both. And I asked him about this rock, and he knew about it, and he says it's about a 2-day hike. You know, it's hard to get to. And so that's where it's located. Then how do these plateaus form? Well, a mountain is a big mass on a small base, so it's going to sink in. Well, if something sinks in, something has to rise up. So what's the force? It's gravity, and what's the mechanism? It's hydraulics. So as the big mountain's coming by, it's squirting that lava to the side, and then it's going to build and build and build, and it's just going to block fault things as the pressure releases, and it's going to go up. And as it breaks up those pieces, the lava might flow to the top in a crack, and then the lava gets on top, and it gets nice and hard. And then if the great denudation, when a bunch of water comes by and it washes away that soft sediment, it's not going to wash away that lava, which protects that sediment, and that's how you get Red Butte near Grand Canyon. And that's Grand Canyon, that's a key to everything. It's really hard for the evolutionists because that's 1,000 feet of sediment capped with volcanic rock. How does that happen? And that's the great denudation. They had to remove 2,000 cubic miles of sediment just to start cutting the Grand Canyon. And this is the Grand Canyon. And just look at this. There's 2 lakes. You know, as the plateau rises up, it lifts 2 lakes. There's enough water for three Great Lakes there. And if you were in Page, Arizona, you would have had 1,400 feet of water on top of you. If you were in Grand Junction, Colorado, you'd have 1,100 feet. That's a big lake. That's deep. There's a lot of potential energy just waiting to get sprung loose. And it finally happens when Grand Lake overflows, and it overflows its side, and then it starts to cut down. And it cuts a valley down there until it hit the hard Kaibab limestone, and then it spreads out and it makes that valley. So now there's nothing pushing down on that Kaibab limestone, so then it bulges and then it cracks. That's the key to Grand Canyon, bulging and cracking 3 times. So then the river flows through the crack, and then it undercuts Hopi Lake. And now you got 2 lakes draining like crazy, and this one's even higher, and he says that waterfall is probably 20 times higher than Niagara Falls and 100 times the flow, or vice versa. I do a whole talk on the Grand Canyon, because when we did our Hydroplate conference, we were going to show a movie, and it didn't work. So I did a quick Grand Canyon thing, and yeah, it's phenomenal. So all that stuff is just sheet eroding all that sediment away, and so now there's nothing pushing down on the Kaibab limestone there, so that plateau bulges, right? The whole plateau bulges, and then it cracks. The river flows through the middle, and it cracks, and then it washes through, cuts out the Grand Canyon. Keeps going down, down, down until it hits the hard Vishnu schist. The sediment, it should have got wider right then, but it didn't. It cut down to the canyon, and there's nothing pushing down on it, and then the basement rock cracked. And that's the inner gorge, 1,200 feet deep, and it's 40-some miles long, and the river flows through that crack. It's really hard to explain why the river cut into a harder rock instead of getting wider. And so that's Grand Canyon in 3 minutes or 4. And so the same principle, you know, the mid-ocean or the mountains going down, something has to rise up. Well, as the mid-oceanic ridge was rising up, something's got to sink in, and that's going to be the Pacific Ocean. Pacific Ocean sinks in, that's the ring of fire. That's why you got all those earthquakes and all those volcanoes there. There's just so much melted sediment or melted rock there. And that's what formed the Mariana Trench. It got sucked down 7 miles. How else are you going to form that? And that's why they're mainly in the Pacific Ocean. And they even had a continent that got sunk in. Zealandia, sunken 8th continent, reveals its buried secrets. And what they find? Evidence of land-based fossils in the ocean there. And Walt Brown predicted you're going to find granite in the Pacific, and that's what they found. It's about the size of India. And then the water that was covering the earth gushes off the earth and makes canyons. You know, it gushes off the earth to fill in the Pacific Ocean, and as it gushes off, it cuts a canyon, and then the continents sink in and the oceans rise up, therefore burying those canyons in water. And how do you get one buried in snow? Well, the water gushed off Greenland, and the ice age filled it up. And that's how they got the lakes in Antarctica, too. You know, the water, every basin would have water in it at the time, and then the ice age starts. Oh, and by the way, there are 91 new volcanoes they found beneath Antarctica's ice in 2017. So if the ice is melting, it could be from those volcanoes, not global warming. Here's a good resource for you, Inconvenient Facts. Gregory Wrightstone, he says, carbon dioxide is plant food. If we had more, we'd have more food and less droughts, and he explains why. And then CO2science.org shows how much more food we'd have. Well, we'll talk about that on Saturday, how they can use that to control us. But what caused the ice age? Okay, what caused the ice age? An ice age it's counterintuitive. You got to have warmer winters and cooler summers. Okay, you have to have warm oceans so you get a lot of precipitation, but yet it's got to have cool continents so it comes down as snow instead of rain. And so what's going to happen? Well, the oceans are going to be warmer with all those volcanoes in the Pacific, and then the continents are going to be cooler because they're higher elevation. Plus, with all those volcanoes, the atmosphere is going to be clouded up with aerosols, so the sun's not going to be able to get through. And so you get 400 or 500 years of the snowing more than it melts year after year after year after year. You're going to get the ice cap up there. It's going to lower the ocean 125 meters, so almost 400 feet, and that's going to make land bridges all over the place. So that's how the animals can get to Australia. And again, this is after the flood. Well, how come Siberia and Alaska don't have a glacier? Well, that's because it came down as rain. They were close to the warm oceans, and the altitude may be lower too, so it came down as rain instead of snow. And then how did the mammoths freeze? Well, some of this stuff was coming up with such tremendous force. It's the big hail, cold hail. It was going up with so much force that it got out of our atmosphere and it went into outer space, and then gravity pulled it back down. So you got this frozen carbon dioxide, which is dry ice up there, coming down, and the water and the mud and the rocks. So they got buried in muddy, icy hail, and it buried them to the ground. I don't know how much was on top of them, and then the flood came by. Okay, so that's why they froze. Well, how come they didn't thaw out? Well, that brings us to the big roll, because the mountains on the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere pretty much cancel out except for the Himalayas. We'll let that red dot be the Himalayas. Okay, so if you have a big mass on a spinning object, that big mass is going to try and get to the outside. And so it's going to take what's on the top, that was on the top, now it's going to the side. Therefore, something that was on the side is now going to the top. And that's why we got the frozen mammoths. This will be a good illustration. Mammoth Bill, nice and temperate, a lot of food, a lot of water. And then the earth rolled and went up to Mammoth Chill, where they never thawed out. And if that did, and also it brought up snakes and tortoises and alligators and all that stuff that can't live up there, and that's how they got up there. Also, it put tropical palm tree down in Antarctica, so it went from the side down to the bottom. And if that really did happen, would it leave a mark? And it's like, yeah, it did. It's called the 90 East Ridge, because the Earth is not perfectly round. There's a bulge at the equator, and as the Earth rolled through that bulge, it cracked the Earth, and that's the 90 East Ridge, and that's why it points directly at the Himalayas. So my guess is the Himalayas were 2,100 miles farther north when they formed, and then they've settled out there. Again, yeah, it points right at the Himalayas. Okay, what caused the inland seas to form? Now this one's going to be a little trickier, but we'll answer 3 different questions with one concept. How do you fuse past iron? That's a tough one. And how do these chondrules? What's the violent collision and fast cooling that they talked about? And the best thing you can do is go into Brian Nickel. He's got a YouTube channel just for the hydroplate, and he's really good at the animations. A lot of what you're seeing, he designed those animations. And the hydroplate theory is the origin of radioactivity. And with that origin of radioactivity, they realized that you can predict earthquakes with, we'll get to that. But the key to all that is granite's made of quartz, and that's pretty much the basement rock on the continents. Quartz, feldspar, mica, and hornblende. And notice how it's all scattered around in there? Granite's never been molten. If it would have settled out in their specific densities, but they're all mixed together. So granite's never been molten, the earth has never been molten, the Bible's right. Her granite is 20% quartz, and that's important because it's piezoelectric. If you stretch it or compress it, it's going to make a spark. And they have seen like lightning in earthquakes. And they know it, that lights in earthquakes. And then how do these chondrules form in meteorites? Again, they had to have a lot of stuff. So as the water's shooting out, it's going to slam down and it's going to build up pressure, and then it's going to shoot up again, come down, high velocity collision. Remember that? Then it gets pushed to the side, and it's going to wait for the next pressure to build up, and then it's going to get shot up into outer space. And that's how we get the chondrules in space. And that's going to be cold up there. So you got a hot collision, and then cooled quickly. And that's perfect from what the hydroplate says. So it just keeps on. And then we're going to skip the radioactivity. That's going to take a little bit too long. But basically the lightning in the granite, like lightning in the sky, it's going to have plasma, and it's going to have this thunderclasp, In the rock, it's going to make that granite stick together and to make all these different elements. Because they don't think that radioactivity was made during the creation week, because God said everything was very good. Is it very good to have uranium causing birth defects? And radioactive material is basically by granite. If it came from outer space, it'd be all through the earth, but it's not. It's not in the ocean, and it's mainly by granite. And as this radioactivity is going on, it's going to cause weak spots in the earth, and then finally the earth might get too warm and weak, and it's just going to explode out of there. And that's how you get the inland seas with a whole bunch of salt at the bottom. Remember? I think that salt dome there, that's from the bottom of the subterranean water chambers. And that's how you're going to get all these free neutrons going on there. And there's more deuterium in the comets than in the oceans. And so that's why that's a whole nother rabbit trail. But some of this stuff got exploded with such force that not only did it escape our atmosphere, it escaped our gravitational pull. So you got all this water and dust and rocks and stuff lying around there like dirty snowballs. Anybody know what a dirty snowball is? Anybody? It's a comet. They say the comets came from Earth. That's why you find all this stuff from the Earth in those comets, and they can't explain it. Can't explain it at all. That's how you get the rounded boulders in Comet 67P. It went through a fast flow of water, and then it got shot up there. And then how do you get those moons? Florence has 2 moons. How do you get these comets, peanut-shaped asteroids coming together gently when they should be blowing each other to smithereens? Because, if you play pool, those things bounce apart. That's what should be happening. Unless they're all coming from the same space at the same speed, or the same place at the same speed, they're going to come together real gently. And that explains how you get those peanut-shaped asteroids, how you get those moons on asteroids, and those contact binaries came together real gently. They can't explain it any other way. And if you want to see more of this, if you want to see more of his videos, I did this in Nebraska 2 weeks ago, I guess. Hydroplate updated, and then I gave a talk in St. Paul, and the first question was, hey, what's the hydroplate? I was like, oh boy. So I tried to do it in 5 minutes. And then how come the short-term periods go in the same direction as the Earth? Well, just think of the Earth as a train going 100 miles an hour, and then you shoot something out at 50 miles an hour. Doesn't matter which way you shoot it, it's going to keep going the same direction as the Earth, as the train, even if you shoot it backwards. If you're going 100 and you shoot it back 50, it's still going to keep going that way. That's why most of the short period comets, less than 100 years, go in the same direction as the Earth. But if you shoot it out doing 150 miles an hour, yeah, still most of them will go your way, but if you shoot it straight back, it's going to keep going backwards. So now it's a 70-30 mix. But if you shoot it out at 500 miles an hour, it doesn't matter which way you point it, it's going to go in that direction. And that's why Naiku is orbiting backwards. It's in the wrong direction, according to them. And it's the professor says the orbit of Naiku is unusual, that it's nearly perpendicular to the plane of the solar system. More than that, it's orbiting in the opposite direction of most solar system bodies. Furthermore, there are a few bodies that share the same same orbital plane, with some orbiting prograde, that's in the same direction as the Earth, and some orbiting retrograde. That was unexpected. So they have a lot of problems with that blind chance theory, and it's like, hey guys, it's the creation model. The creation model, especially the hydroplate, puts it all together. And then why is the, if it really did happen, would it leave a mark on the moon? Yeah, that's why the near side is pounded and the far side isn't. And that's why we found the Earth's oldest rock that was formed. That's how we got sea plankton. It just answers all those questions with one theory, with one assumption, and it's a biblical theory. And I showed this last night, but it's always fun seeing his expressions again.
So let me know what you think.
This is the most insane space news in a really long time. This asteroid, called Bennu, is 63 million kilometers away. That's 160 times farther than the moon is. Over the last few years, this spacecraft called OSIRIS-REx traveled all the way there, touched its surface, grabbed a sample, and brought it all the way back to Earth. And what they found in that sample is insane. It's rich in carbon, nitrogen, and organic compounds, all of which are essential to life as we know it, but we've seen that before. The asteroid is also covered in a mineral called serpentine, which looks like this. And these samples look just like the type of rock that we find here in mid-ocean ridges. This is where the stuff from the mantle of the Earth comes up and touches the water. It's underwater. Scientists think that this asteroid could be a chunk of an ancient small ocean world. This could be a piece of an old watery planet that's been traveling through space for billions of years, and we just took a sample of it.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
Wow. Oh my goodness. She needs a raise for Moa Brown.
We have a few minor tweaks for. First of all, that watery planet, let's call it Earth.
Oh,
as
yeah.
Kevin Lee likes to say.
What everyone just saw on display was an example of a victim of the government schools, a victim of the deceptions and the errors that Brian has uncovered. That girl, to not even consider that this giant water planet is Earth, but that it's been traveling through space for millions of years, is because she has been victimized by exactly what Brian's been uncovering. And it's actually sad. It's sad to see, but it is instructive as to the work we have to do.
Yeah, and so they have this saying, all scientists work for Walt Brown, because when they discover something, it typically validates the hydroplate. Now, so you have all these screenshots of secular journals, and you can answer them all with the hydroplate. And so I'm doing what I can to get this into the mainstream, and it's a lot of fun. But it makes accurate predictions, too. He's got 50 predictions, and 7 or 8 of them have been confirmed. He predicted that beneath major mountains are large volumes of pooled salt water, and that was confirmed. The crystalline rock under Gibraltar, the Bosporus, and the Dardanelles, and the Golden Gate Bridge, and that was confirmed. And then also he predicted that there would be soil erosion channels on Mars will contain Earth-like soluble compounds such as salt, and that was confirmed. And some comets and asteroids and meteors will be found to be made of crystalline material and forged in extreme heat. He predicted that, and he was right. And then some large near-parabolic comets, as they fall towards the center of the solar system for the first time, will have moons, and he predicted that, and that was impossible, was what they thought. And then asteroids are rock piles, often with internal ice acting as weak glue, and that's true. And if you watch that Nebraska one, he shows how they try and hit an asteroid, and then there's so much dust and stuff it blinds the camera, so they waste billions of dollars. And because it's wrong, their perspective is wrong. And then most of the rocks will be found to be rounded to some degree, and that's been confirmed. Planet X will not be found in the next 5 years by January 2021 because it does not exist, and that was confirmed. And then also bones and other organs, organic material that is going to have carbon-14 in it, and that was confirmed. And I found this fascinating. This is in creation.com, and that's what you should get your kids or nieces or nephews or something for Christmas. Creation.com, they have a really cool magazine. And this one was, they talked about the flood legends. And this one from Scandinavia is fascinating. It says, the axis of the earth was shaken from its roots to its topmost branches. Mountains crumbled or split from top to bottom. Men were driven from their hearths, and human race was swept from the surface of the earth. The earth itself was beginning to lose its shape. Already the stars were coming adrift in the sky and falling into the gaping void. Flames spurted from fissures. Flames, like those earthquakes, in the rocks. Everywhere there was hissing of steam. All living things, all plant life were blotted out, and now all the rivers, all the seas rose and overflowed. From every side waves lashed against waves. They swelled and boiled and slowly covered all things. The earth sank beneath the sea. Then slowly the earth emerged from the waves. Mountains rose anew. I think that's a pretty good description of what the hydroplate would have done during the flood. And again, the objections, I gave it to that professor, and she said, and she didn't believe the assumption was true. And I said, well, why not? She said, I don't believe there was water under the oceans back then. And my response is, why not? There's water under the ocean today. Coming up in those black smokers, some as hot as 67 degrees. And Job talks about that. In Job, God talks about that, the springs in the sea. And we didn't know about it till 1977. And then down at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean is the hottest water on Earth in a supercritical state, never seen before. I wonder how that happened. And then it's also seen jetting up from the floor of the Gulf of Mexico. So a lot of this stuff is just validating it like crazy, and water shouldn't be able to get 5 miles deep, because with that much pressure, the granite's going to be like putty. It's going to be like putty, and also you can't get a cliff. When the fountains of the Great Deep broke up, you can't get a cliff 5 miles high on Earth because it's going to crumble. And these were 60 miles high. So all that stuff was crumbling into there. That's how we got it. So the water shouldn't be able to get there, but in Germany and Russia, they drilled past there, and guess what they found? They found crushed granite with salt water. How about that? Let's see. Another objection would be it would have gotten too hot. Well, let's take a look at that. With all that water coming up, with all that heat, but watch this guy.
Would I dare to take this glove away? Yeah, easy. Easy city, man. No problem. Hot or cold? Begin with a C. It's cool. Relatively cool. HC. I'm not going to put it way down at the nozzle. It turns out that which you are seeing here, gang, is not steam. That which you can't see, that's the steam. But what does that steam do? Begin with the X. Expand. And when it expands, what's it do? Begin with another C. Cool. And there's your evidence of it right there. Isn't that remarkable?
Yeah. And then air is a good insulator. These are Brian Nichols' hands next to an 1800 degree flame. rsr.org/answers is a good place to get information where they've got criticisms of the theory and then how they answer the criticisms. Now, wouldn't that be neat if the evolutionists would do that? It's the hydroplate protocol. You know, this is what they say is wrong, and this is how we answer it. And then this is the biblical verses. Psalm 136, to him that stretched out the earth above the waters. So the earth was stretched out above the waters. The earth and all the inhabitants thereof are dissolved. I bear up the pillars of it. That could be where the granite and the basalt are touching. And then, for he hath founded it upon the seas and established it upon the floods. And he gathered the waters of the sea together as a heap. He lays up the depth in storehouses. Again, that could be the storehouses for the flood. And then again, Genesis 7:11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, the 17th day of the month, the same day were all the fountains of the great deep broken up, and the windows of heaven were opened. Yeah, that's the fountain. You know, the catastrophic plate tectonics, their fountains is lava. And the lava hit the earth and hit the water and made it erupt like that. But water, fountains and lava don't go together. And then, or who shut up the sea with doors when it brake forth, as it has issued out of the womb? And then Job, it's how hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? So there's a lot of biblical support for this model. And I think it should be recognized. In Jonah, I went down to the bottoms of the mountains. How would they know there's mountains in the sea? And this is Psalm 104. The waters stood above the mountains. At thy rebuke they fled. At the voice of thy thunders they hasted away. Could you imagine what mountains forming sounded like? They go up by the mountains, they go down by the valleys into the place where thou hast founded for them. Thou hast set a bound that they may not pass over, that they may not turn again to cover the earth. So this isn't creation week. This is after the flood. And again, this is what I'm trying to do. Walt Brown says a widespread belief system seldom change when frequently reinforced by influential institutions such as universities, media, and religious institutions, and the scientific intellectual elite. That's right. They got the power. They don't want to give it up. They don't want things to change. It makes me think of the kid who says that emperor has no clothes. You know, there's no evidence for this Big Bang. There's no evidence for this evolution. We just have to have a lot of people get informed and say, guess what? This model works better, and creation model for sure. So, but when a vast number of people realize they've been misled, an intellectual revolution begins. So I'm trying to get a vast number of people to realize they've been misled. That's why we have these cards. You can share these things all over the place, and let's get a vast number of people. Let's do something every day. And let the layman willing to examine the old explanations, because you got to see both sides. And again, this has a lot of answers. And then inform others, and then some people might pay a price. They might lose their job if they're a professor. But we need science to advance. And then let's see. Question everything yourself, starting with this book, is what Walt Brown says. And he said that 5 years ago, and the book's still not out. But you can get it. You can get it at rsr.org/HPT. You can get a free download. That's what you just click that 9th edition button. And that's what Ellen did. She did this, and she got the book printed. She had to adjust every margin. She plugged it into some program, and her publisher printed it. And she said, hey guys, look, she made a YouTube video. She said, guys, I got this in print. You know, and they've been trying to do that for 5 years. And I was all over, great job, Ellen, I can't wait to this. And she said, it's one click away from being shared everywhere in the world, all over the world, one click away. And after a day and a half, they said, thanks, but no thanks. And I just can't understand that at all. And there is a controversy about Walt Brown. If you're interested in the story behind the story, rsr.org/HPT, Jane Albright, she compares the flood models, and then she talks about why there is this resistance to the theory, and it shouldn't be there. And sometimes science advances one funeral at a time. And I've seen that happen. I'm seeing it happen. Because the president of ICR, he invited Kevin Lee to go in there and present it to his scientists. I just love that. You know, because when he took over, he said he wrote a letter or an email thing, and he said, I've been given advice to promote the ICR brand. He says, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to promote creation. And then he thanked a whole bunch of organizations, including Walt's. And then he invited them in, and because he said, I want to hear what the Hydroplate people have to say. I don't want to hear what people have to say about the Hydroplate people. And so he gave Kevin Lee the microphone, and it was very well received with 1 or 2 exceptions. And I got to thank him one time because he spoke in Minnesota. If he's ever close, I go listen to him. And I say, thank you for letting the Hydroplate be presented. And he said that the Hydroplate's been marginalized for far too long. And so we just need to get this into the mainstream. Those are some sources, hydroplate.org, rsr.org, and YouTube. And this is a teaser for tomorrow. We're going to turn the page. I've got a YouTube channel, and I've got a few Rumble channels because some of the stuff I get censored. And we're going to take at Yuval Harari. You know, there's tyranny in the world. Go into ynharari.com, and this is what you see, the very first thing. History began when humans invented gods and will end when humans become gods. You don't believe he thinks that? Listen to him.
Now humans are developing even bigger powers than ever before. We are really acquiring divine powers of creation and destruction. We are really upgrading humans into gods. We are acquiring, for instance, the power to re-engineer life.
I mean, all this story about Jesus rising from the dead and being the Son of God, this is fake news.
You don't have any answer in the Bible what to do when humans are no longer useful. Humans are now hackable animals. You know, the whole idea that humans have, you know, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election, or whether in the supermarket this is my free will, that's over.
Power to re-engineer life. Yeah, they think they're gods. And that's what motivates me. When I saw him speak and what he was saying, it's like, that's what evolution can lead you to. They think they're going to be gods. If you could get rid of God, then they can become God. And I was going to be out of town with my wife on doing something. It's like, no, we got to get this out there. And so we did some things. But anyhow, yeah, that's motivating for me. I need people to put their faith in Christ while they can. And so I use the creation message to say, hey, our perspective makes more sense. And I believe that the Creator revealed himself in a book, and that's the book's the Bible. And a book tells us about Jesus who died for our sins. And we want people to put their faith in Christ so they can go to heaven. And we're using this creation model and showing them how NASA has egg on their face all the time, and so do evolutionists. And so hopefully if they realize they have faith, they might, what's that, you have to close their mouth so you can tell them the message. And that's kind of what we can do. So anyhow, thank you so much for your attention. And there's some websites that if you want more